Hello everyone and welcome to the Roundup going into week 5. We are here to go through the biggest pieces of news and the best fantasy notes from Fantasy Life to help you dominate your fantasy league going into this week. We've got a few players to welcome back. We've got a few injuries to talk about, so let's get into it in the Roundup. Now, I know some fantasy managers are so excited to be in week 5 because we have two key players potentially coming back this week, and that is Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp. But what should we expect from these two players in their potential first games back? Let's take a look. So, of course, let's talk about this Rams offense and what it looks like with Cooper Kupp back. But, of course, we can't talk about the Rams offense without first mentioning Puka Nacua and what a great season he's had. So we can see here on fantasylife.com using the Board Pro 75, he is leading in receptions. His 39 receptions is the most by a rookie in his first 4 games in NFL history. So that's absolutely phenomenal. And you can see over there, receiving yards is set at 501. So Puka Nacua has had a phenomenal season. And of course, last week, we can't forget, he caught his first ever touchdown, and it was a walk-off win over the Las Vegas Raiders. So Puka Nacua in this offense with Cooper Kupp, while it might be a little scary to some fantasy managers, I don't think that you should have many problems continuing to set him in your lineups. If you need a little bit more convincing as to why you should continue firing up Puka Nacua even with Cooper Kupp back, we can look right now at Fantasy Life's new comparison tool. And I just want to show you and go through these 3 wide receivers and what they've looked like without Cooper Kupp. So as you can see here, the best utility has been Puka Nacua. You can look through everything: routes, targets per route run, targets, catchable targets. It's all right there for Puka Nacua. So you should continue firing him up in your lineups. Now, Tutu Atwell is the one where I can see fantasy managers start to get a little bit nervous. But if you're in some of those deeper leagues, I do believe this could be a 3-headed monster with Tutu Atwell, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp. So again, if you're in one of those deeper leagues, I think you should look at if you can have startable players ahead of Tutu Atwell, but if not, not a bad option. The one here, obviously, to me, is Van Jefferson and what's going to happen with him. I think he's the odd man out here. So keep firing up, of course, Cooper Kupp, keep firing up Puka Nacua, and in some instances, it is okay to look at Tutu Atwell and say, I want a little bit of this Rams offense anywhere I can, so go and do it. This last one might be an obvious no, but of course we're also welcoming back Jonathan Taylor potentially. So we have to go through what that means for the Indianapolis Colts. And I'm going to make it really easy on fantasy managers using our comparisons tool. If you have Jonathan Taylor in your lineups and he is good to go in week 5, you are starting him, no question. He should be nowhere near a fantasy bench. Now, as for Zach Moss, you can see here that Zach Moss has been doing a great job with Jonathan Taylor out. You can see it in the routes, the targets, everything on here except for one. But if you have Zach Moss, you should not be starting him if Jonathan Taylor is good to go. He is a good handcuff because we have seen that Jonathan Taylor has had injuries. And so just in case Jonathan Taylor continues to have injuries, or if he's traded by the October 31st deadline, you want to hold on to Zach Moss. Other than that, I probably wouldn't start him if Jonathan Taylor is good to go. And this Jonathan Taylor saga looks like it could be coming to an end. So we'll see what happens in week 5, but it is a no-brainer for any fantasy manager. If Jonathan Taylor is good to go, he should be in your lineups. Now, we've had a handful of fantasy disappointments so far this season, but one that could be hurting fantasy managers especially bad this year is none other than quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow. So let's dive into how disappointing Joe Burrow has been and if there is a light at the end of this tunnel. So as we can see here on the Board Pro 75, Joe Burrow had a preseason ADP of QB 6, but right now his current rank, QB 31, which is not what fantasy managers want at all. And of course, Joe Burrow has been dealing with a calf strain injury, and that has really limited him in this offense. But scoring 3 total touchdowns for this offense has also not been good for Joe Burrow, hasn't been good for T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, or Joe Mixon. So this offense has not been looking good. We can see here in points per game, right? 12.3. EPA per play, you've got a negative in front of that number, which you don't want. Yards per play, 4. Yards per pass attempt, 4.8. Number 32, number 32, number 31. It just has not looked good for the Cincinnati Bengals. And right now, their 0.96 points per drive are the lowest for a team through 4 games since the 2019 Jets. So I keep piling on, but I just have to make a point that this Bengals team has not been good for fantasy. Of course, I'm not going to leave you hanging with all those really bad Bengals stats and not give you some options at quarterback just in case you want them. The Cincinnati Bengals play the Arizona Cardinals in Week 5 and then the Seattle Seahawks in Week 6 before their bye week in Week 7. Now, to me, those seem like winnable games, but if you have some questions, if you're a little bit nervous about Joe Burrow, we can go to the Fantasy Life rankings and see who some of these Fantasy Life rankers in Dwain McFarland, Matthew Friedman, Ian Hartitz, and Waz would play ahead of Joe Burrow. So right now, I'm going to let you know, Joe Burrow isn't even on the first page, if that tells you anything. They have him at QB 17 for Week 5 consensus-wise. So some players that you could start ahead of him right now. Matthew Stafford is one that I'm looking at that some potentially may want to play instead. They play the Eagles. Brock Purdy going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, and Jared Goff. Those all seem like pretty great options if you have them available to start ahead of Joe Burrow this week. A few fantasy rookies have dominated to start the season, but Dwain McFarland has a rookie quarterback that you need to buy before it's too late. Let's take a look.
The player that we are talking about is none other than rookie quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson, who's averaging 22.4 points per game. That's 5th at quarterback, but it could be even higher than that. In Week 1, he scored 22 fantasy points despite missing the final 3 plays of the game. Normally that's not a big deal, but they were from the 1-yard line. He had a chance to punch in a rushing score or throw for a touchdown that would have added to his total. In Week 2, he scored 18 fantasy points despite only playing 30% of the snaps. He played 2 snaps in the second quarter before Gardner Minshew took over. And finally, in Week 4, we saw a full performance from Richardson. He gave us 28 fantasy points. Richardson ranks number 1 in the NFL in fantasy points per dropback at 0.79. The next 2 closest players are Lamar Jackson at 0.69 and Josh Allen at 0.63. The list of quarterbacks to score at least 0.70 fantasy points per dropback since 2011, it's a very short list, but it should get you really excited. It's Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson times 2, Cam Newton, and Robert Griffin III.
Our head of betting, Matthew Friedman's favorite play going into Week 5 is none other than David Montgomery going up against the Carolina Panthers. Now, we all remember, David Montgomery left Week 2 with a thigh injury and didn't play in Week 3. But in Weeks 1 and 4, he dominated. He now has 215 yards, 4 touchdowns on 53 carries. But here's the thing, David Montgomery may be having a great season so far, but Jahmyr Gibbs managers shouldn't be panicked. This is a reason why Jahmyr Gibbs should be a great buy low candidate even with David Montgomery's surge. Look, Jahmyr Gibbs fantasy managers know that his utilization has been frustrating, to say the least, especially with the Lions because they spent a top 12 pick to get him on this offense. But here's the thing, the underlying data does show that he is a talented running back. I want to first look at Jahmyr Gibbs and Week 3 because this is a big thing to highlight. He had 17 carries on a 59% snap rate, which really does go to show that the Lions don't believe that he is just this one-dimensional pass-down running back. They know that he is talented. So this is a really good time to buy Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit low, especially with fantasy managers that don't believe that he is really going to come into his own his rookie year. And now if you're looking at David Montgomery, he is a mid-range RB2 and is going to have those RB1 spike weeks. But if you're looking around at your league and one of your league mates just isn't into Jahmyr Gibbs, again, this is the perfect opportunity to buy low on him because we could see him really step up towards the middle back half of the season. Now it's time to build our Underdog Pick'em slip going into Week 5. And remember, Underdog is matching your first deposit of up to $500 when you use the promo code LIFE. So make sure you go to UnderdogFantasy.com to get that done. Let's go build our Pick'em slip. All right, now that I'm logged in at UnderdogFantasy.com, let's get this Pick'em slip built for Week 5. It's going to be a good one. I can feel it. First, I want to start off with Baltimore at Pittsburgh, and I really want to look at rookie wide receiver Zay Flowers because this receiver group is banged up with Rashad Bateman and OBJ. So I really like the higher than 45.5 receiving yards for Zay Flowers. Here's the other reason is that we have him projected at fantasylife.com for 58.2 receiving yards. So I think this is a really good spot for Zay Flowers. I think them going up against a banged up Pittsburgh Steelers team is also good for them, so I like Zay Flowers higher right there. The next game I want to go to is the New York Giants at Miami Dolphins. Now, this is a tough game for the Giants, and I think the Miami Dolphins are huge home favorites. I looked at the spread earlier, and it was Miami Dolphins -10. So no offense to all these Giants, but we're going to skip past you a little bit, and I want to look at the rookie Devin Achane and probably go higher than 50.5 rushing yards. Here's the thing. The New York Giants rank 24th in defensive rush EPA. So I'm looking at Achane and thinking, yeah, this is a little bit low for a rookie that's been absolutely red hot. So we're going to go higher there because, of course, as we always do, you know I like to go higher. We like to be optimistic here. So the last one I want to go to is another rookie running back, and this is one we haven't mentioned in quite some time, but we're going to do it now. I really like this Houston-Atlanta game. First of all, CJ Stroud's been dealing. We already know that, but that's not who I want to hit on right now. Right now, I want to go to Bijan Robinson. And we're going to get a little spicy here. We're going to go higher on his 0.5 rush and reception touchdowns. He hasn't scored since week 1. I think that is completely incorrect, and I think that he is going to score this weekend. So that's kind of an easy one to look at and say, okay, I buy into that. But I think this is a great game for Bijan Robinson to get his second touchdown on the season. So this is what our pick'em slip is looking like. We've got Zay Flowers higher than 44.5 receiving yards. We've got Achane higher than 50.5 rushing yards, and we've got Bijan Robinson higher than 0.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns. I love it. Go to underdogfantasy.com to lock this in. All right, that was the roundup going into week 5. Appreciate everyone for hanging out with me today. Make sure you go to fantasylife.com because we have all the tools you need to dominate your fantasy leagues. And while you're there, subscribe to our newsletter. It is in your inbox 7 days a week and 100% free. Make sure to check those injury reports, make sure to set those lineups, and go ahead and dominate week 5.